Welcome back. Do you ever have one of those games where, as you can see right down here, the opponent has zero inaccuracies, zero mistakes, zero blunders, no missed wins? There were nothing you could do. You made a couple of mistakes, but your opponent just dominated you. I've had those, but this time it was me with a 97% accuracy, according to the stockfish on chess.com. So if it sounds like I'm bragging, I'm just really relieved. If you've watched my previous videos, you know I make mistakes and blunder in every game, or almost every game. And so I really needed this, and I'm just going to take you through it real quick. We're going to switch to the analysis tab here. I tried to play the London, which is not my favorite opening, but it is the opening with white that I am learning and studying. I haven't mastered it yet because my rating is still 1100. So I brought the knight out, got the c-pawn here. The computer says I can just move my c4 pawn, my pawn to c4, or I can just take that c-pawn. I decided to just protect it. Maybe I should have protected with c3. I don't know. I protected with e3. And then my opponent just pushed past, which is unusual. I don't see that very often. Usually when we get a c and d pawns tension here, usually the c pawn just stays where it is. I didn't really realize at this point I could just push b3 and hope for a trade here to free up my rook, which is what the computer is suggesting. So I just pushed c3 to lock that in, thinking I could push this later because that pawn can't go anywhere now. Also, if the opponent plays e6, their bishop really doesn't have anywhere to go down here. All these squares are guarded by my pawns. Their bishop will be limited to these two squares for now. And but then after I moved my c-pawn to lock that in, the opponent played bishop to g4, which is less irritating on this side because when this happens over here with the bishop to b4 and I have a knight there and the knight is now pinned to my king, I have to hurry up and castle to get. But here I don't have to hurry. I have the pawn guarding the knight. I can move my queen at any time. So here I decided to just immediately ask the bishop the question, are you coming for the knight, or were you just getting close for no reason? And it did come for the knight, which in a very odd situation gives me a queen out front on move 6. I've been very well trained to keep my queen in reserve until absolutely necessary. And also about at this point I realized that when I moved to e3 I have blocked in the London bishop, which normally sits out here. And so we're not playing the London. And that's when I realized that. Here, my opponent played an expected move, e6, which frees this bishop. But again, it only has two choices of squares, so I'm not too worried about it. I was ready to play b3. It is protected by the a-pawn, but I wanted to get this knight here first. The reason for that is that adds an extra layer of protection to the b3 square, but it also protects the e4 square for when I'm ready to push this pawn forward. So I played that, and then my opponent brought the bishop to one of the only two squares that it can, I assume preparing to bring the knight somewhere and castle. And so I played b3, which was my plan ever since that c-pawn moved forward. And here it says my opponent should have just taken the b-pawn. It's just going to be an even pawn trade. And yeah, I assume that's better for them than leaving this here, because if they leave it here and I take and they take, then I get an extra pawn. But they didn't take. They instead played their first mistake of the game, b6. I don't know exactly what b6 was preparing. It's possible that was a mouse slip and they meant to play b5 to give an extra protection here. Or maybe they thought I wanted to push my b-pawn past here and they were preparing a5. I really don't know what the explanation for b6 is. I do know, I didn't realize at the time, but I know now that it freed up this diagonal a little bit. One move prior to that, there were two pawns on this diagonal. When they moved that one, knowing I'm about to capture on c4, that's going to open this diagonal for the rook. I didn't realize that at the time, but it worked out well for me. So I took that pawn thinking, when they capture back, I'll put my knight here. I still didn't see that. So they took, I put my knight there. Now here, perhaps obviously, my idea is to come in this way. About that time, I saw the rook. And I thought, well, it'll maybe depend on what the opponent does. And they did that. And here, I saw something very interesting to me, which is that I'm about to move that knight, my knight anyway, which will get out of the way of this bishop, my light squared bishop. So I waited a few seconds here. I don't know exactly how long it took me to play this next move, but I calculated. This is pretty high level calculation for someone at my level, that when I take the bishop with check, the opponent only has a couple of choices. Check is a forcing move. They obviously can capture with the queen, which seems like a decent option. But if they capture it with the queen, I have a free rook with check. The other options are because I've moved my knight here, right? So they can get out of check just by moving the king. However, if they move to one of these two squares, if they move to this square, f8, well, that would be checkmate because my knight's here on d6. And if they move here, I can just move the knight back. Or, I thought of this too, if they move there, I could move the knight here, which threatens the queen, and if the queen moves over, then I could take the knight with my bishop and protect my knight there on b7. And anyway, so that's what we calculated. So I took with check. They captured with the queen. So I took the rook, as I said. Here they only have, well, you know what? I just now see this. The computer says that's the best move. It actually looks like a pretty good move. Bringing the knight back, it would be guarded by the queen, and that would block the check. It would give up the a7 pawn. But they didn't see moving the knight back. They moved the queen back. So here I know I'm already up material, the rook and the pawn. So why not trade queens? So let's do that. That forces a king move, and it leaves that knight hanging. Boom. And they resigned right there on move 14. This was really good for me. I'm going to try not to get overconfident. I'm not the kind of guy that gets overconfident. But thank you for watching, and fingers crossed that I can maintain at least some level of not making mistakes for a little while. Anyway, I needed this game. Thank you for watching. Oh, this game also bumped my rapid rating back just a hair above 1100. I had fallen below as low as 1075. So I'm back above 1100 and going to keep plugging away.